Hi, I'm Michelle Hewitt.
And I'm Amanda Lockitch, and this is Disability with Possibility.
Dancing with the flames, even when I'm down, there's a power purring loud, rejoicing.
So, Michelle and all of our listeners, this is our last episode of the season. We saved somebody very special for this. Who is it, Michelle?
Today we have Clare Li. Clare, we know from joining our leadership team, but we've purposely put this episode after the episode with Luca, as she's the only non-dancing member of his team and probably the only person I know that could rival him for positivity.
Absolutely. I would like to see a dance-off versus a dumpling-off.
And with that, you really need to stay tuned to listen to why we're talking about dumplings.
Every now and then we have to remind ourselves and our listeners that not everybody has experienced disability or come across disability. And so we just want to let everybody know today we're dealing with multiple disabilities. We're looking at a cancer journey. And so let's hear Clare in her own words.
Dancing with the flames, even
Well, hello, Clare, and it is so great to see you. So, Clare, tell us, what part of the world do you come to us from?
So I am speaking to you from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and this is where I've been calling home for a while.
Tell us what you love about Montreal.
I love the people here. I love all my friends, all the supportive people. I love my work here, but mostly I love the people.
So, the people, I know that a wide range of friends have been wonderful supports to you because you are living with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. Do you want to, let's get that out of the way off the top. Let's start talking about that. And then there's no elephants in corners here. What do you want to tell us?
Okay, so yep, that's a great idea to get it all out of the way. I was diagnosed in 2018, November 1st, and went through having a double mastectomy, chemo, radiation, multiple surgeries for all sorts of other reasons. But after all of that and being placed on tamoxifen, which is because I have a hormone-positive breast cancer, I was diagnosed with recurrence in June 25th, actually, of 2021. So I'm coming up to my 3-year anniversary with stage 4 breast cancer. And that's pretty much it. That is where I'm at.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? Sorry, because I was told to go on tamoxifen, or recommended, and then when I looked, and because mine was also hormone-based, not genetically based, I thought that was probably the wrong thing for me. So I'm just curious about that, about what you sort of said there. If you could explain that in a little bit more detail. Is that fair?
Yeah, sure. So for individuals that have been diagnosed with hormone-positive breast cancer, typically if you're not at menopause, then they'll place you on tamoxifen, or they might choose a different aromatase inhibitor. For me, it was tamoxifen that I was to go on, and it worked out for me from basically 2020 until mid-2021, until reoccurrence developed. So as to why you would be on tamoxifen is typically because it is a estrogen, progesterone positive breast cancer, but it may not always be the choice, and it may not always be the thing that works best for you. There's also something called the HER2 positive or HER2 low situation too. So there's also other different types of medication that you might end up going on. But for me, it was tamoxifen.
So I know you have other non-visible disabilities. We'll get to that. But someone who myself lives with impairments, labels are often a big thing in the disability world. So why would you say you have cancer, or what parts of your cancer are disability?
So I found a lot of parallels having grown up with non-visible disabilities to begin with. I have autoimmune conditions, which we'll go into a little bit later. I've drawn a lot of parallels as I started cancer treatment. There's definitely big lifestyle changes. There were things that I didn't realize that, I couldn't do anymore because of cancer treatment. There is also the thought of nobody thinks about a mastectomy in this way, but it is losing body parts. And that is a huge change. So there's that parallel that I could draw on. There's also just, things like when I'm flying, I'd have to wear a sleeve that would help protect me from lymphedema. And there are costs associated to the, I would call them aids of sorts. There's also, having gone through radiation, I didn't know that you couldn't be out in the sun afterwards for a long while. So I had to look into getting protective clothing when I'm outdoors. And those are all things that I never really thought about and never really anticipated that you would have to pay extra for these things. You would have to rethink how you went about your daily life. And I found that there was just a lot of similarities, if you will, to what I think about when I'm looking for accessibility type things. If I'm thinking about even like accommodations in the workplace as well too. So like, again, I drew a lot of parallels when it came to that. So it was a different way for me to examine disability in a different way, because not a lot of people talk about disabilities. There seems to be that stigma around it. But when it comes to cancer, there's also a stigma about it. But there's also a lot of people that have cancer or have had cancer, and it's treated differently.
Yeah. And I think, we often talk about, part of, as you just mentioned, part of your world, and you talk about accessibility, and we talk about that in terms of barrier removal, and those are often very concrete things. We're going to get rid of stairs and all of those sorts of, but when it comes to impairment, right, which is part of disability, there's nothing in the world that can be done to like remove those things as barriers, right? But they really shape how you have to move through the world. So I think that's a great distinction. I think that's yeah. So let's pull the other little elephant into the room then. So you said you grew up with autoimmune disabilities. You want to chat about that a little bit?
Sure. So back in the single digits of Clare era, I think I was about 7 or 8 when I was first diagnosed with psoriasis, which most people don't think of that as a disability, and neither did I at that age. But it was a condition that caused great discomfort. It was a condition that was very visible. And back then, a lot of people would ask me like, oh, what's wrong with you? Or what is that? Are you contagious? And you kind of live with this stigma and just like you're trying to hide something that, back then wasn't easily controllable. And then not long after that, I was diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis. So some individuals with psoriasis would end up getting psoriatic arthritis. Now, again, as around that time, I think I was like in the age between 10 and 12. And people don't necessarily understand, like, you're a child with arthritis, and it's not just a little bit of swelling. It really affected the way that I walked. It affected if I could walk, and it affected both my knees. It affected my hands, my fingers, my toes. Not long after that, it affected most parts of my body, and it was wildly out of control. And it was wildly misunderstood as well, too, because it would change from morning till night. And I could be in so much pain in the morning that I could not possibly get out of bed to go to school. But then by noon, I might be okay. And alongside of that is like, you're feeling all of this pain and you don't know what else is going on. So your parents make call to the doctor's office, and by the time you have your doctor's appointment, well, you don't feel it there, or it's switched
Oh,
side.
that must have been so hard as a kid, right? Because everybody thinks you're trying to wag off school for the day, right? And they think that, it doesn't matter. I mean, I would imagine the Claire that we know and love now is very similar to to little Claire that, that wanted to get on and get everything done. And I'm not sure that you were somebody that would ever, well, my English words, bunk off school for the day. That must have been hard.
Yeah. And, a lot of times, like even in gym class, for example, it would be very difficult to do the activities, even though I love exercise, I love sports and everything like that. But just physically, my body just wasn't able to do the things that it wanted to do, or the things that it once was able to do.
That's
I think
tough.
that story anecdote also, this may be a little left of what you're talking about, but when we're talking about the disability tax credit, which we'll explain further for those who don't know what it is, we find that people often run into that problem of when you are feeling well enough to tackle that onerous form, you feel like you're lying about some of the things that you're saying. And when you are, when things arise, and you may not feel well enough to handle the form and actually get yourself eligible for the DTC, you feel so terrible you can't bring yourself to do it because you're just in pain or you're just, immobilized. But that kind of reminds me of that.
And not only that, I think that if when you feel well enough to actually fill out some of the forms that you're asked to fill out, and then, more times than not, if you're denied, all that effort you put into it just seems very wasted, and it feels a little bit hopeless to have just done something like that, to put all your energy into it. So that's a big theme of my childhood, is trying to budget your energy for what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, and what you can't accomplish. But then you also have like the flip side of everything, fatigue. Being a child and fatigued all the time, well, it's a whole other story when you're talking about pains that might keep you up at night. So it's back then, I can honestly say that as a kid, I felt like I was constantly trying to keep up with everybody else. I didn't have the same energy level. I didn't know when my body was going to be in pain or not. You set out to do certain things. You put goals together. You put objectives for yourself together. And sometimes they won't materialize. And the frustration that came alongside of that is huge. And then adding to that is that my understanding of arthritis at that point in time, I didn't realize that there was different types. I didn't realize that I had something that destroyed my joints. It wasn't just that I was feeling swollen or it was hurting. It was actually actively breaking down my joints.
Yeah, and one of the most rare types of arthritis. And as a child, when you put all of those pieces together, it, I would imagine your doctors didn't have much experience in it either.
They didn't have much experience in it. My family also didn't have a lot of experience in it. I have an older brother, but health concerns weren't part of his deal. So it's probably a lot to manage. If I think about it, both of my parents were immigrants to Canada. I was born in Canada, but it's a lot to navigate. I think it's a lot to navigate in a different language. It's a lot to navigate with something that back then was just relatively unknown. And the only thing that we could think of was, okay, she has arthritis. And, the only person I had a comparison to at that time was my great-grandmother, who also had arthritis.
Yeah, in little Clare and the old people, right? It's so
Yep.
At some point, Claire, though, you have taken all of this and you have turned it all into being such a success in life. And we know you because Amanda and I, because you came and joined us at DWP on the leadership team, where you've always been a positive force. But one of the things I really want to talk about is that we spoke to Luca a few days ago, who, again, we all know through DWP, and you're a non-dancing member of Ill Abilities. What do you do with Ill Abilities?
Sorry, just before we go there, because we are going to, I'm not sure what order they're going to come out, but Ill Abilities is a international breaking crew of disabled dancers. So sorry, I just wanted to preface that before we find out how you're the non-dancing member of that crew.
Yes, so Ill Abilities is an international crew of professional dancers who just happen to have disabilities, which is really, really interesting. I met Luca back in university days. In fact, he's one of the first people that I met. And at that time, I was the orientation director. And he marched into my office. He'll tell the story differently, but he marched into my office and demanded that he wanted to perform, which I said, great, that's excellent. He said, I'm a break dancer. And I said, amazing. I'm all for this. And that's really the origin story of it all. And we started talking and we got along really well. And we ended up putting together the first jam that he officially held. And the rest is kind of history. And from that sense is that I've always just helped him out and organized and did things in behind the scenes, because that's really where, I guess, before cancer, I was never in front of the scenes kind of person. And so I felt very comfortable helping him out and giving him a hand with like organizing events and just wherever I could support him. And, the most interesting thing about our friendship was the fact that he gave me my first foray into thinking, do I have a disability? Because up until much after I met him, I never really thought of myself as having a disability. I thought of myself as having autoimmune conditions. And, just to continue on to my autoimmune story, after psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, I also got diagnosed in university with ankylosing spondylitis, which is yet another autoimmune condition, and where psoriatic arthritis affects most of my joints. Ankylosing spondylitis affects your vertebrae. It can affect your eyes, and it can affect your internal organs. So I kind of just, if there was anywhere that I couldn't have pain anymore, this was going to round it all up for me. But yeah, it wasn't until I met Luca where I toyed with this idea of it wasn't really, I have to say that there was no point where I thought, oh my God, Luca's so amazing because has a disability and he's dancing on crutches. But there was just a moment where I saw him dance and I was just like, wow, that's really cool.
Absolutely.
And it didn't dawn on me that he must be the only person that was able to do this with crutches and dance the way he does. But I just thought, wow, that guy has amazing balance on crutches. He is strong. And there was never a point where I said, that's really cool because he had a disability. It was more of like, that's just simply really freaking cool. And to me, over the years, I just was like, wow, this is really impressive. And like, then I started listening to his motivational speaking. I took some time to kind of just go off and check out his motivational speaking gigs at the different schools around Montreal. And I just started really listening to what he's saying. And there was a huge turning point for me. I remember where I was just like, where he was saying the disability is not in your limitations, but it was really in your mind. Like that's what's stopping you from doing things. And I think that's not exactly what he said, like I'm completely paraphrasing, but it did strike a chord in my head where I was like, that's probably pretty accurate for me. Just to back up a little bit on my own personal history, somewhere between being diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis and ankylosing spondylitis, I didn't know this growing up as a teenager, but because I always attributed any pain that I felt in my body to being arthritis, but my left femur, the top of my femur, started dying, and it's called osteonecrosis. And my femur started dying inch after inch, and it started changing the way that I walked. My left leg started getting shorter, and it just started shaving off into my hip joint. By the time I ended up having surgery in 2016, I had lost almost 7 inches of my femur.
Wow.
So that creates a huge discrepancy in my leg length, but it also creates difficulties in moving because it's basically the bone, my femur was shoved into my pelvis. So it lost a lot of range of motion. There was no hip socket. There was a socket, but it was just stuffed in with my bone. So all of these things were kind of like percolating in the background as I met Luca, as I started witnessing like all the amazing things that he was saying to kids. And I was also meeting some of his students around that time too. And one of the biggest things that I could say that changed my life was seeing all of his students. And I was looking at them and, some of them had backgrounds that were very difficult in the sense that, not a lot of familial support. And some of them are very well supported, but all of them possess the same kind of energy. And that energy was sort of led by Luca to remind them that they are super people. They are people that are amazing. And as I was listening to all of them, I was looking at these kids and I was thinking, yeah, they're absolutely amazing. Like they just went out there and danced in front of people, in front of crowds, and they were having a lot of fun. And I was comparing and contrasting that to myself at that time. And I was like, am I having fun? Am I doing what these kids are doing up on stage? They look like they were genuinely happy. And it led to a big question in my mind, like, am I having fun? Am I happy with my life? And if I'm not, what needs to change? And I think like the biggest thing that clicked off in my head at that moment was that I wasn't having fun, and it wasn't the fact that I was a behind the scenes kind of person, but I hadn't really embraced all the things that I was going through. I had still been spending a lot of my time trying to fit in, trying to do what everybody else is doing. And I wasn't doing it successfully at that time because I couldn't keep up. And it felt like it was the story of my life at that moment. Like, how do I keep up with everybody else when I'm dealing with pain? If I'm dealing with, and it's not even just about, losing inches off my legs and stuff like that. It was that I was still trying to operate as if there was nothing wrong with my leg. It's not something that I spoke about. It was, when people would say, oh, did you hurt yourself? A lot of time, because I was limping. And a lot of times I was like, yeah, I did, or I would say something like, oh yeah, I walk a little bit terribly when it rains, and I actually got to a point where I genuinely believed that was true, that I was just walking a little bit differently, that it was noticeable to people. But I didn't realize that was like an everyday occurrence, because I actually didn't think that was happening.
That's bringing up two things for me. The first one is in one of the other interviews we did, this idea that we all can do anything. We just need to figure out how we can do it, what we need to make something work, right?
Yes.
Which I think is a big part of that. The other thing that you said that was almost a throwaway for you, but I really want to bring it back, was I was a behind the scenes person until I got cancer. And then you just came busting out. So I'd love to hear that process and that decision behind it, because that is often a time that people recede. And all I see when I flip through your Instagram, or a lot of what I see is whatever you're going through, there's just your beautiful smile and you're like, and I'm going to bring this forward because it's important.
Yeah. So what's actually really interesting about my Instagram is that you'll see an actual break. You'll see an actual break in the Instagram from the moment that I got cancer is probably the first time you'll see my actual face posted. And before that, if you're to ask me if I had any photos of myself between 2009 to 2018, you won't find one, because I didn't want to have any photos almost. I'd never really wanted to appear in a photograph, because I was picking at myself a little bit. I was like, oh, I'll take a photo when my leg is healed. I'll take a photo when I'm exercised more, where I feel like I've made progress walking. And I made all of these excuses of like, when will be that right time to show my face in front of the camera, or be the person that gets interviewed, or speak in front of a group. And I never wanted to do that, because I felt this less than feeling, if you will. And certainly cancer didn't make me feel more than, like, it's cancer after all. But one thing that did click in my head was that when I first got diagnosed with cancer, I was like, oh my God, I'm now that there's like this huge possibility of I might not survive this. And that wasn't enough to get me in front of the camera or doing all the things. I would say that it was after what I'd gone through with cancer that made me start to really reevaluate everything that I was going through. And that reevaluation started off with, am I proud of the way that I have gone through with life? And I could tell you at that particular point in time, I would say yes. I'd overcome a lot of different things. I did it in my own time, but there was always something in the back of my head that said, how happy am I right now? Like, how many times have I said that I would do that if, and I can tell you that if I would write down every aspect of I would do that if, or I would do that when, I could fill up like, thousands of pages of all the things. And it really wasn't until the pandemic where I decided to live a little bit differently. And it would be, I started this, I would like to say it's a three-year embarking on, but it's actually been more than 4 years. Now I'm trying to dial it down a bit. But I basically went through a moment where I said, I'm going to say yes to everything. I don't care what it is, I'm going to say yes to it. And that's actually how I got into DWP. Because when Luca first told me about it, I said, that's really amazing. How can I help? And I didn't mean, how can I help it be on the leadership team? I really meant, how can I help you do the things you need to do on DWP? And I would just hang out in the back and, you just throw me the task and I'll get them done, I had zero intention because I was like, oh, I can't be on a leadership team was really what I thought at the very beginning. Like, I can't, I'm not a leader.
That saying yes to everything, that is so brave, right? I mean, what a decision to take.
It was brave and scary. And there was a lot of times that I said yes with full out tears in my eyes. It's like, oh my God, why saying yes? But I did. And it was honestly, it was a very cool way to grow.
So I know through cancer, you've done a lot of writing and it's been beautiful to read. Was that something that you said yes to? Was that something that's always been part of your life? So where does Clare, the author, come into all of this?
So as a child, I wrote a lot. I read a lot, but I also did a lot of writing. But again, I never thought that it was good enough. And there were many times where people said, oh, you write really well. But there was also a lot of people that are like, oh my God, you're writing. You're just like really long-winded. and any type of criticisms like that would always get to me. It would always make me, double down and say, okay, well then I'll only share it with people when I think I'm better, which again, never really happened. But writing was really interesting because when I was diagnosed with that stage 4, my cancer had come back, and it was in the middle of the pandemic. It was 2021, and Montreal was going through a lockdown. I lived by myself, and by that time, it was like the pandemic, like isolation was pretty normal for just over a year by that time. And sometimes my life sounds like a never-ending story, but, it wasn't just like the pandemic started, cancer finished, the pandemic started, and then boom, my cancer came back and we were doing the pandemic and stuff like that. There was other things that were happening at that point in time for me. One was that just as I finished cancer treatments in 2019, I finished December 2019. In January, I did a little bit of a travel trip with a friend of mine. We went to Japan. I took her out there because her grandmother was dying, and I thought it was super important for her to see that. As I got off the plane, I could not feel my legs from the waist down, and it kept going on and off like that. So I ended up getting an MRI done March 4th of 2020. And so it was like March 28th when my doctor called me and said, we did a MRI to see like how your spine's doing, but instead of just seeing how your spine's doing, which it's not doing that well, we saw a 15 centimeter tumor in your lower abdomen. And I was like, oh, and they're like, and you just had cancer, so this might be a thing. So in that interim, because it was the pandemic, I also had a 15 centimeter tumor in my lower abdomen that ended up growing to 21 centimeters and 5.6 pounds when they removed it in late October.
They found it in March and it wasn't removed until October?
Pandemic.
All that time, it's just your unwanted friend growing away?
It was my unwanted friend that I could see sticking out of my lower abdomen. And it was rock hard. And having just gone through cancer, they said, this could be cancerous, but we can't biopsy it because it's vascular, meaning that it if they biopsied it, I could bleed out. And all that to say, we were prioritizing COVID at that time, so they were willing to push me back, and until someone said, okay, let's take this out. But by the time they took it out, it had grown 6 centimeters. And it was much bigger than the last time they did an MRI on it. And that was also not the end of it, because once they realized that finally it was benign, it wasn't cancer, and I was like, whew, thank gosh, I don't have cancer again. Then I had a wound that wouldn't close. It was persistently open for about 7 more months after that. And then I had a 6-day break before they told me that my cancer came back. So there's just like a lot of activity kind of going on in my life and surrounding with the hospitals. And on top of it, working full time. So that was the way that I dealt with life at that time, and there was a lot of things going on. I kind of forgot how I got here into this conversation.
Writing.
Writing. So when I got diagnosed with my cancer coming back, it was June of 2021, and they told me so, and they just said, okay, so we'll probably just put you on a med, and off I went. And that was it. I wasn't overly addressed with anything. And I was like, okay, I don't really know how to deal with this. And so if you also recall, during the pandemic, my family lives on the West Coast. They live in BC. And I wasn't traveling because I just sort of felt like if I was to have gotten COVID, that would just not work in my favor whatsoever. So I sat tight. I hung out by myself, and I tested the waters with a few individuals in my life that I saw on a more regular basis and I told them that my cancer is back and it's stage 4, and they just cried. And I spent time comforting them, because I was like, oh, no, I didn't want to upset you. I'm just, And then I was like, I can't tell anybody in during the pandemic that my cancer is back, because everybody was still celebrating that, I had beat cancer, and it wasn't that long ago. And nobody wanted bad news during the pandemic. So I scoured the internet to figure out, how do I get more information about my situation? Because I kept reading things, and everything kept telling me I had 5 years to live. Like 5 years was the average amount of time that you could live with metastatic breast cancer. Maybe if you're lucky, kind of thing. And I was just like, oh, wow, I don't feel good about that at all. And so I found this magazine called Wildfire, and it was headed up by a lady named April Stearns, and she offered free writing workshops. And I was like, I can't talk about it. I definitely don't want to feel it. And I've already immersed myself into work. There's not much more immersion that could go on. What do I do with the feelings that I have? And so I tried out a writing workshop of hers. It was free, and it was really nice. I didn't really write about cancer at all in that first workshop. I wrote about my great-grandmother, and I was just like, that felt good. And I didn't know what to make out of it. And I was like, people had the opportunity to share during this workshop, like what they wrote. And then I heard other people share, and I was like, well, that was really great. And what I wrote is just crap. And I told a few different people about my experience with this writing workshop and how good it made me feel that I had a way to express myself differently. And, like, again, keep in mind, like, I had my hip surgery already. Like, I could work out, but all the gyms were closed. I could go walking around outside. But the whole reason why I had the MRI to find that lower abdomen tumor was because I actually had something wrong with my spine still. So I wasn't walking well. After about 10 seconds of walking, my legs would run numb. So, like, I could go biking. There's other things that I could do, but I didn't have like a true outlet. And so Wildfire magazine, they offered these writing workshops for 6 to 8 weeks. And I decided I was going to do one. But the biggest issue that I had at that time was the cost. It was in American because it was an American company. But I just said, you know what? Let's try. Let's try and make enough money to pay for this writing workshop. And I'll tell you that it was ultimately completely worth it for multiple reasons. One is that it puts you into a small group with other women that had breast cancer or have breast cancer, either which way. I listened to their stories, and being who I was back then, I just felt like, oh my God, I'm not as good as these people. Like, they're amazing and they write well. And then some people said, oh, but you write really well too. And I was just like, they said I wrote well. Like, that's amazing. And it felt nice. It felt nice to be appreciated for something, even though my head was saying, yeah, they're just trying to be nice. But it still felt good. And it was the best 6 weeks. And I felt like I could express myself, and I felt really great about it. And after that, I think that everybody asked if I was going to join another writing workshop. And I said, I would love to, but it's not in the budget. Like, it was a lot to get there in the first place, and I would have to save up. But I sure missed it, and I thought, well, I did it once. I can write by myself now, but I can tell you right now, it's not the same thing. And about, I think 6 months or so after that, somebody, I don't know who still to this day, but they gifted me another 6-week session. Somebody reached out to April and paid for another workshop. And it was the nicest thing that anyone could have ever done, because I had no idea how much I needed that second workshop. Like, I had no idea. And after I was done with it, it made me whole. I met new people, and the people that were part of that workshop were just so special to me. And it forged some of the most interesting, greatest friendships that I could ever have, of people that I've never met before in real life. And I needed that. And they offered me a type of support that I don't think that any of my friends could, because they truly don't live with cancer in the way that I do. And they were all younger women, and they all had dreams and aspirations the same that I probably did, but different, And so it was phenomenal. So that's really how I got into writing. And once I started feeling comfortable around them, and now you have to imagine, by the time I got to my second writing workshop, I've gone through more than a year of saying yes to things. And so the more that I said yes to things, the more that I just, these aren't big things for the average person. But again, you had to come back to who I was back then in 2020. I was a person that only wanted to be in the background. And that was around the second workshop was around the time that I started transitioning from a background person to a sometimes in the front person. And fast forward all of that to DWP. You know how that was the first time when we went to Ottawa. So we went to Ottawa in 2022, in October. And I remember, I can't remember who it was. Was it you, Michelle, or somebody else? But somebody said, would you like to speak on Parliament Hill at our rally? And I said yes. And in the background, I was crying. So I was like, why? Why would I do that to myself as my very first time speaking in public to people?
That was your first time speaking in public? Oh,
correct.
My. You were just beautiful. You were strong, and you spoke to everyone with such passion about
And I
how we
was
live our
shaking.
lives. Yeah, you were shaky, but I put it down to the wind and the cold, Claire. It was pretty windy out there. But no, you were that. Wow, if that was your first time, you were absolutely incredible.
That was my first time. Yep.
So I'm gonna flip this over to Amanda because I know that she's got a question that she's burning to ask you to do with dumplings.
We had a private conversation about dumplings, I have to say, and so the first part of the question is, what is your favorite type of dumpling to consume? And in hand with that, what is your favorite type of dumpling to make? And are they the same? Because some dumplings are very difficult to make.
So, dumplings. For the longest time in Montreal, I've been known as the dumpling queen. It was something that I did as a spare time to feed my friends. And it was also something for me at a time where just not really knowing what to do with myself. And during the pandemic, I used it as a tool to bring happiness to people around me. Times are tough during the pandemic, I'd have to say. And so I embarked on a make your life better with dumplings. So I've made a lot of different flavors. One of my personal favorite is a mushroom dumpling with sweet miso and edamame. So it was a vegetarian dumpling and it was very tasty. I also really enjoyed I did one with like spices and mint and beef. So that was quite lovely as well too. Around that time, I discovered that mint is so refreshing with a bit of coriander and a bit of like chili peppers and stuff like that. The type of dumplings that I like to make are called gyoza, which is a Japanese dumpling. It's all about the way you fold it. So I would lovingly fold each pleat in. They would be perfectly shaped. And then I would fry them in a pan-fried steam combination. So you fry the bottom till they're a bit crispy. You pour a bit of water in, put a lid on top of it, and it steams the rest of it. And then when it's done, the bottom part is crunchy and the top is not. Yeah.
You've just made me really hungry.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, and I also just wanted to say, because I think we're probably coming to a close, although we could talk for the next few hours, I think, at least. You had talked about, as a child, figuring out how to reserve energy, how to save what you needed. And it looks like you figured that out in abundance because, as Michelle said earlier, you're just such an accomplished human. You're such a lovely human. And we're super grateful that you not only joined the DWP leadership team, we got a chance to meet you, but that you were here today, that you said yes.
Yes, I keep saying yes to things. Saying yes hasn't stopped. And one thing that I could tell you that works for me is that I used to think that I was really tired, and I do get really tired still. But when you find the right thing to put your energy towards, I think it makes it all, like, it is totally a game changer for me. When I got diagnosed with cancer again for the second time, I want my life to mean something, and I want my life to help other people. And I've always wanted to help other people, and making that as my goal, it's very simple. It's just help people that want help, help people that can help other people. But if it costs you nothing, can you do it? And seeing how much that helps other people and seeing what they do with it makes me so excited. And that just gives me energy again to keep doing it. And
I think at the end of the day, not to cut you off, but I think it also helps you because there is no, I'll wait until this person is worthy until I help them. I'll wait until, right? All the things that we tell ourselves. I'll wait until I'm better at this until I do it or put it out there.
It's so instantaneous. It's so just like, one of the things that I realize is that it is so hard sometimes. It was really hard for me to ask for help. And if somebody's actually coming to you and asking for help, like if it really does cost you nothing and it's so easy to do, then 100% that I would do it. And by doing so, a lot of times people will say, well, tell me, when you helped me, I was able to do this. And that is amazing. And some people have come back to me and said, what can I do for you? And I was like, well, I'm good. So now that you know how much it helped you, and I do this a lot for the people that I coach and mentor these days, is like, when they ask me, what can I do for you? And I would say at some point in time, you're going to get to a level in your life where you have the ability and the knowledge to coach and mentor someone else. So just remember to do that for somebody else.
So Claire, this podcast is, riffing off our disability without poverty is our disability with possibility. I can't think of anyone that personifies that the way you do. The challenges, as you say, the openness. You now talk about your life journey of discovering yourself, aside from, all the other things that are happening to your body that, I understand how sometimes we put those off as sort of, that just happen to everybody, that, you lose 7 inches off your leg, doesn't. But no, Claire, you bring such beauty and grace and passion to everything that you do. And of course, you made dumplings for friends in your alleged spare time during the pandemic, because, what else would Claire do? So I just want to say thank you to you. We have definitely filled our time here with beautiful words, and we are so grateful to you.
Thank you for having me.
Amanda, it's amazing what you learn in these podcasts. I can't believe that I learned when we recorded it that Claire being in Ottawa with us was her first public speaking. She was an absolute professional. It was just wonderful to see.
I loved so much of what she said, as you know, particularly around dumplings, but the fact that having a cancer diagnosis is what brought her from behind the scenes to the front of the scenes and empowered her to step up and be a face was quite remarkable.
And for days afterwards, I just kept thinking about, what if I said yes to everything? And how brave that is. Like, we talk about people in disability and disease and cancer, and that, people are often given all of those, oh, they're so brave, they're so inspirational. I have to say, given everything that Claire tells us about her disability and her cancer journey, to say yes to everything is one of the bravest things, where really I would just want to go and run turtle and just hide under my duvet.
Yeah. And the ability to power through saying yes to everything when I know everyone over the age of 30 wants a nap at all times.
Yeah, and I kind of feel guilty of the things I asked her to do that she then said yes to now. Right. Well, what a wonderful woman that I am so grateful that she's part of my life.
Yeah, she's got that infectious smile.
So, Amanda, who are we going to talk to next week?
Oh, Michelle, you already forgot. This is, sadly, our last episode of season 1. We are so very, very grateful to all of our guests. We are so very grateful to all of the people whose hands have contributed to this. And we've had a few people already reach out asking how they can be part of another season. So we are crossing our fingers and looking forward to that. And we will keep you posted when that may happen. Thank you again for joining us. You can reach us at hello@disabilitywithoutpoverty.ca. And Michelle, thank you so much for being the
and thank
lovely,
you too.
gracious. Oh, you're so good. I'll just keep my mouth closed.
We'll just sit here together and chat, perhaps, instead of being on a podcast.
No, that would be fun.
That would be fun because we never see each other otherwise.
It's very true.
Goodbye, everyone.